Good morning again. Good morning, Chair, board members, staff, and members of the public. A few housekeeping rules before we begin in order to minimize background interference and as a courtesy to your colleagues, please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices, and please mute all microphones and speakers on your electronic devices unless you're speaking. Thank you in advance for cooperating. We'll do a formal roll call. Please answer here or present. Chair,
Present.
Member Adams,
Here.
Member Austin,
Present.
Member Gavin.
Here.
Thank you. Member Gawolb.
Present.
Thank you. Member Gonzalez.
Here.
Thank you. And for the record, the Chief Operating Officer is absent today.
Okay.
Chair, there are no members of the public who registered as required in order to provide comments. As such, we will proceed, excuse me, with the regular calendar. The first order of business is a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, July 28, 2021. Do I have a motion? Please say my name.
Gavin.
Victor Gonzalez.
Aye, Joseph Adam.
Okay, I took Gonzalez. Seconded by,
Gavin.
Joseph Adam. Oh, yeah.
I think I heard Paula, Gavin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And none opposed. Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to the reports section.
I'm sorry, Jackie. Could
Yes.
I do one brief update for the board before we do the reports?
Yes, I was just going to invite you to provide.
Oh,
any
thank you. I didn't want to. Thanks a lot. I just felt compelled to, because I wanted to share with the board members what we know about the infrastructure and capital discussions going on in Washington. And I want to emphasize, we do not have final bill language yet. We have draft bill language. The monies I'll be talking about in a minute are not associated with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but they're part of the reconciliation bill that the Democrats would like to get through the House and the Senate. So I want to say we've had strong advocacy from the New York delegation, both on other members on the various committees. In this case, the House Financial Services Committee is charged with drafting because it's a reconciliation bill. They've also advocated very strongly with HUD and the White House. The idea here is what we're going to describe is likely to be somehow distributed it's 10 years worth of funding. We don't have all the details yet, but there's so many rumors floating around, I thought it'd be helpful to just kind of go through what we have. So what the House is proposing is $80 billion for public housing nationally over a 10-year period. And the way that they want to distribute that is in a series of 3 major distributions. The first distribution would be made 60 days after enactment of the reconciliation bill and would use the capital fund formula, that's the formula that HUD currently uses, to divide up across all the housing authorities $10 billion in capital funds nationally. Since we know the formula, our estimate is that it's possible we could get 2.2 billion available within 60 days of enactment. That's about enough for us to do 5 large sites with comprehensive modernization. So that's the first slug. That leaves about 66 billion left to distribute. And what the bill language proposes is that the secretary would have a lot of discretion to make priority investments to repair, replace, or construct properties assisted under Section 9. And the bill language divides up the 66 billion into 2 parts. About 22 billion would be distributed within 18 months of the law being enacted. And those would be grants that we would have to apply for or become eligible for. So what that criteria is and how HUD may treat that, we actually had a call yesterday, but that has not been worked out yet. So there is probably going to be a distressed properties category, and we certainly would be eligible under that. The third distribution comes sometime between 18 months and 48 months after enactment. And that's the balance of the 66, that's $44 billion, again, distributed through grants that you qualify in for or you go after. There's also not related, there's 2.7 billion for competitive grants. That's also available. I don't know if we would apply for those or not. And then there's administrative funding for HUD, and the secretary is given a fairly broad waiver language. So I know as you're talking to other residents or other folks in the communities, I think there's a sense that we're just simply going to get $40 billion handed to us if this reconciliation bill passes. And I just wanted the board members to be aware that we've been in heavy discussions with HUD, the delegation, and even yesterday, we had representatives from the White House on the call, but that there is this stepped process to distribution. We're very excited about these numbers. Don't get me wrong. This is inconceivable a year ago, but and I think in fact, the first slug of funds would allow us to do maybe comprehensive modernization at 5 of our most difficult properties. So that's what we know so far. And I just wanted to brief the board on that. We do not have any details on how HUD is thinking about these distribution grants or these distressed property grants yet. I think they're still trying to work it out. And the other thing I would say is keep in mind, none of us, neither HUD, the administration, NYCHA, or any of us have dealt with money at this scale before. So there's going to be some stuff to work through. So I just wanted to stop and give the board that update real quickly. And maybe if we had time, take a couple of questions.
I certainly have one. Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
Victor.
Member Gonzalez.
Yes, I certainly have one. So I want to be clear in what you said. So first we have to wait for the enactment of the law.
Correct. Correct.
And then at a bare minimum, we're looking at a wait time. And this is providing we get the, shall we say, when we're, what is it, the word you use, that we're eligible for it. So we're looking at least into 2023, 2024, before any of these funds will be actually released to us. Is that also correct?
That's only the first amount of money that comes through the capital fund formula, Victor, is available 60 days after the bill passes. So we would have available to us, not in our bank accounts, but available from HUD, 2.2 billion.
Okay.
And we could begin to access that for planning, for other purposes, and we would get that pretty quickly. The other amounts, the bigger amounts, are subject to some kind of process, even though at 18 months they've got to have that money distributed, and then there's between 18 and 48 months for the balance. So the first portion, the 2.2, comes quickly.
Okay. Okay.
The balance is going to end. And the other thing, HUD is suggesting that, they're going to base some of the needs on housing authorities updating their physical needs assessment. We had planned to do that anyway. So I'm going to see if we can't accelerate that for us. Ours was done in 2017. It would be due this year or next year anyway. So, but we made a lot of, I just want to emphasize, we're still trying to work this out. And the call yesterday was very collaborative. because they're taking our ideas about the approach and thinking about them in terms of how they want to disperse the money. So that's helpful. But yes, only the first slug, the 2.2, comes 60 days. And then sometime after that, it's hard to guess, but we would begin to get notices from HUD that the rest of the money becomes available at 18 months and maybe before, and no longer than 48 months.
In your estimate, do you see anything at all that would not make us ineligible at all to receive these funds? Is there anything in the way at the moment that you feel we need to clear up in order to be eligible?
If they keep a distressed properties criteria, I would say I don't see a thing.
Okay,
Because we can certainly show that the properties have all the things in the agreement that we signed with HUD, and plus the age of the buildings. I mean, that all exists. If there's other criteria applied, I can't say at the moment.
got it.
The things we have to watch out for in the next few weeks, this 80 billion nationally is predicated on the 2.3 trillion reconciliation passing. If they cut the number, if they can't get the 2.3 passed, then that's going to impact all the numbers in the bill, probably including ours. So that's one thing to watch out for in the next few weeks as Congress makes this debate. I think it'll pass the House that way. It's unclear what's going to happen in the Senate.
Yes.
So yeah, so we know we're going to get something. We know that if we get the 2.5 or 2.2 from the feds, we also have comprehensive modernization money that the city put in the city action plan for the agreement. So we would have, by sometime next year, we could have 7 sites in comprehensive modernization, which would be, either in the planning, design, resident engagement, or that kind of thing. And potentially, we also stress the need to do alternative procurements because, we're talking about $500 million contracts for some of these sites. And we're going to have to do them different. We can't just bid that. So that's what we have so far.
As far as in order to save time, because I have few questions, I'm just going to ask one more and then open it for whoever else has any questions. You mentioned something about the secretary having discretion as to how the monies are spent. I'm sorry, but I have a little issue with that because if his discretion does not, in my opinion, does not look at what we actually need, I would hope that in this process, when he does decide to use that discretion, that he at least communicates with us so that he knows what our priorities are, he or she.
So, yeah. Well, Secretary, her representative was on the call yesterday. So they're aware of what we're talking about. Yeah. So
okay,
HUD, we had 3 HUD staff, one from the Secretary's office, one from public housing, and one from maybe their planning shop. But the Secretary's office has been engaging with us. So so they're aware that even though she has this authority, that's really granted to her to set up the structure to get the money out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's how I've been thinking.
I'll leave it there.
Okay.
This is Paula. The one question I have is, even in a best case scenario, obviously we still need more money. So are we still confident of additional vouchers that would be part of the blueprint for change?
We haven't taken the blueprint off the table because partly we're waiting to see how much money does come from Washington over what period of time. There are additional vouchers available anyway in the budgets and in the reconciliation bills that we could get access to.
Great.
So there also, the bill also, I think the reconciliation bill also increases the numbers of tenant protection vouchers, which were the vouchers we were planning on using. So depending on what happens with these grants and this capital investment, we would have a better idea after this passes what that's going to mean for the trust in January. You know,
Great.
that I think,
Thank you.
I would say one other thing, Commissioner, we need the procurement relief no matter what. And if you recall, the trust bill included a substantial authorization for procurement flexibility. In addition, it created the alternative procurement method. It created requirements for resident hiring. It also created requirements for MBEWBB. I think that's a package no matter where we get the money from. And
Yeah,
we've said that we talked to the state ledge folks about this. I've talked to the housing committee chairs about this. And we've also talked to HUD about it. So because we don't want to be in a position where we get, say, 2.2 billion for, you know, the first slug of money, and we've got to go through a conventional procurement process, we'll never get it out the door. But let's see what happens. And we have some time. We have some time to, you know, pivot a little bit if we need to.
Yeah, and that was really what I was thinking about, that the blueprint for change is still necessity. The additional vouchers are still necessity. It just may
Could
be
be,
the mix
yes.
of money.
That mix of money is, yeah, and how fast we do that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right, right.
This is
So,
great, though.
well, it's exciting to have numbers at this scale. It's the first time since 1937 that we've talked about recapitalizing the whole portfolio. Of course, 37,
Yeah.
we talked about building it, but it's kind of astonishing. I'm not that old, Victor, so don't be laughing over that.
I'm sorry.
Greg.
Yeah, Joe.
Okay, so we know on the large stage was what you just explained, very, you know, detailed. So let's talk about a little bit smaller stage, which is what the Lieutenant Governor, now newly appointed, stated that he is going to give us a few $100 million to take care of the immediate needs. And he had his hands gesturing, saying, capital projects aside. That's how he detailed it. Anybody can Google it or pull up the interview. He was on various outlets. He said he's going to give us a few $100 million. Now, he was under enormous pressure as a legislator, running around telling people what he's going to do for NYCHA. Now that he's sitting in the ivory tower somewhat, and the money is there, that money will be coming. That's for two reasons. One, it's needed. And the people in the various districts, he's promised that these things are going to be taken care of. The same things that we're dealing from day to day. Two, to enhance his name recognition and what he's going to do politically for himself, he's going to make this happen. But he clearly stated this is for our day-to-day things that we're tripping over, falling over, trying to put a screw in. So we just can't, he didn't say exactly what day is coming, but will that money be used as directing for the things that are, you know, biting us and nibbling at us from day to day? The big money might change, like you stated, depending on how the bill passes and what the negotiations with. I understand that, and that number, and then the time frame of it getting here. And I know everybody already has, you know, their foot on the capital projects accelerator, but we're going to get some money to help out for the day-to-day things that are painfully difficult for the residents. You know, besides the vouchers, besides all those things that we can't, you know, look at right now, there will be money to get screws and knobs and, you know, knickknacks. So I'm asking, will that definitely go directly to what he said toward what he said is going to go?
I don't have any idea, Joe. I mean, we don't know. What we have from the state so far is capital money. Now they may want to do this. I mean, you know, we have the 450 million for boilers and elevators. We have another, I think 100 or 200 million. Also, I think one of those is going to go for elevators, and the 100 might be for compliance. But we have not seen anything on operating funds or that. Now he may have said this with all good intention. Don't get me wrong, but the other thing is that he's also going to do a task force around NYCHA. I can't tell you, but I could ask Brian Honan to check on whether these things are connected in some way. In other words, is this contingent on the task force? Is it part of the discussion? How's this going to play out? So we're very happy that we're on people's minds because we could certainly use what you described. But I don't want to tell you that we've got some kind of finished deal or we know we got amounts or anything like that yet. It is possible it could come, but it's not quite done baking.
Well, this task force is going to basically be set around to monitor what's going to be done with the money. So possibly some more will come, from my understanding, and that if he gives us the money, which he will be giving this to us, he's put himself out there with this, then the task force is going to, I think, make sure that if they tell us to get a daily news and a post, that's what we do with it. I think, and I'm putting it in terms that I understand.
Sure.
And he's put himself there. He's newly appointed. He has a lot of pressure on him to get his name recognition and motor going. And I don't see him putting himself out there like that, and only having 50 cents in his pocket ready to give us. But I'm not privileged to the actual money that's in the dresser drawer, but that money is coming. And I think, again, he stated, and I quoted, that he said, capital projects aside, this will be specifically take the aches and pains out of the day-to-day things that, that hurt us now, as opposed to the big things that we're trying to take care of. So I don't see him, doing that. He just got in the chair. I don't really see that as politics go. I don't see him doing that. He wouldn't put himself out there like that. I don't think so. And that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, if it happens, it'd be great. But I don't want to tell you we have any numbers or formal thing yet, because we don't quite yet.
May I interject a moment? Chair?
Yes.
Joe, keep in mind, Member Adams.
Yeah.
If you recall, and again, I'm one of those dubious characters that always remembers the history. If you recall, a few years ago, they promised under pressure that they were going to give us all this money for roofing. And then at the last minute, they turned around and said, you know what? We, the politicians and the elected officials, know where the money's needed better. So we're going to be the ones to decide what to do with that money. And NYCHA was kept holding the bag. Just keep that in mind. Food for thought.
Yeah, well, the food for thought is being cooked, because now that was then, this is now, and now
same pressure. Same pressure.
But some of those people are gone, Victor. They are gone. It's
He still has the same pressure.
They are gone.
Well, let's look. I think look, I know that we have a new administration that wants to do something. So I'll start with that, because the wanting to do something is also, we have state legislators and senators who also want to do stuff. I think that we have a good combination here. And what I'll do for the board is, as soon as we know things, like sharing this information about what's proposed at the federal level, we'll circle back so the board is briefed on what we think might be possible at the state level as well. So we'll keep you guys apprised.
Okay, thank you.
But I'm
All right.
hopeful. I'm hopeful.
Thank you.
So, all right, that's all I had. Are there any other questions? We can get to the briefing then.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Great. Thanks, Chair. So we have two presentations today, and it's 11 o'clock. The meeting is slated to end at 12:30. And I know other people have other things to do. So with that, I'll state that each presentation, including question and answer, should last about 45 minutes. So about 30 minutes for the presentation and maybe 10 minutes question and answer, so that I can give the chair an opportunity to make some closing remarks. So with that, I'll start, and I want to remind people that they should put their microphones and their speakers on mute so as not to interrupt the presenters. We'll begin with presentation number 1, NYCHA's Green Energy Strategy, and it's being co-presented by EVP Steve Lovesey and Vice President of Energy and Sustainability, Vlada Knef of the Capital Projects Division. Steve and Vlada.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about Capital's energy programs. And Board Member Gonzalez, thank you for the suggestion and invitation to do this. I'm going to start with a little bit of history. Energy Programs was founded in the Department of Finance. Its focus was on utility billing, metering, oil purchasing, and a little bit of research and development. Around 2015, Energy moved to Capital Projects Division, and we formed it into a new department called Energy and Sustainability. At Capital, Energy's role expanded to be more forward-thinking about NYCHA's energy needs and how to lower NYCHA's overall operating costs. In 2016, Capital published the first sustainability agenda outlining those goals. And the agency went from about one self-managed EPC or energy performance contract to currently a 10-year goal of 30 million in EPCs, which we not only met, we exceeded it. We're at 310 million. And it was to be done in 10 years. We did it ahead of schedule in 5. In addition, we created new relationships with the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, the Department of Buildings Office of Sustainability, the New York Power Authority, as well as the New York State Energy and Research and Development Authority, which we just received one of the largest grants in their history that we will talk a little bit later in the presentation. Could you please move to the next slide? It's important that NYCHA create roadmaps that set a course for direction, a master plan for a more viable future, but also it sets a path for compliance of laws and goals where there are deadlines into the future. And if we don't act now, those deadlines will be upon us within a second and we'll be unprepared. And with the pantheon of capital projects design excellence, if you could move to the next slide, please. Energy and sustainability is responsible for NYCHA's climate mitigation roadmap, which is the electrification white paper, and the revised sustainability agenda that will be released during Climate Week in September, which is next week. We have a great responsibility to the city of New York. NYCHA developments are the anchor to many of the neighborhoods across the boroughs. Through design and construction, we can improve the quality of life, not just for NYCHA residents, but the entire community and our city. NYCHA represents 3% of New York City's carbon footprint. If we tweak just a little, there will be a big impact to the city. But if we make change, we will change the entire Northwest region. If you could go to the next slide, please. We're often asked, why now? Why set a course for lower carbon? Why create a roadmap for electrification? It's about seizing the moment. In order to preserve public housing, one needs to lower our maintenance and operating costs. How we use our utilities and the efficiency by the way we use it will get us there. NYCHA is moving to the comprehensive modernization model that Greg has spoken about, away from our component replacement. This provides an opportunity to bring the housing stock up to not just new standards, but future standards, and it's reachable, and it hasn't been reachable in the past. There's a federal and state movement specifically around a green grid. We have public support and we have funding, and as this slide shows, and we will admit it, that there are laws and regulations that are going to force us to get there. The next slide, please. So what is Local Law 97 and how do we get there? Local Law 97 requires NYCHA to reduce its carbon emissions to 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. It's ambitious, but with good planning, we will be there. It is going to take a number of strategies across our portfolio, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those strategies. At this time, I would like to introduce Vlada Knef, the Vice President of Energy and Sustainability at Capital Projects Division.
Thank you, Steve, for that introduction, and thank you, board members, for the opportunity to present the work that we do here in Capital. It is important and transformative. If you go to the next slide, I do want to highlight that NYCHA campus steam heating and hot water systems are a 19th century technology still being used in the 21st century. You've heard Greg say that last time we capitalized or recapitalized our buildings was at the turn of a century. We're still employing those same Scotch marine boilers, and because campus steam is very hard to balance and distribute evenly, the tendency is usually to turn up the heat, which is resulting in historically higher temperatures. On the chart, you see that over 90% of the nightly temperatures actually are higher than the desired ranges. If you go to the next slide, being able to, besides being able to balance centralized gas-fired boilers, they are also highly inefficient between the origination of the heat and hot water production process. And when it actually becomes useful heat and hot water, we lose about 2/3 of the energy. And that's usually in the underground pipes, in the heat and hot water distribution points, and in the buildings themselves. We've got windows that are leaking and are not properly sealed. Next slide, please. So up until 2020, NYCHA invested in in-kind replacements, and in some cases, particularly in properties where there's coastal flooding risk, we elevated those boilers to above grade. This is partially because there haven't been cost competitive heating and hot water technologies for tall buildings. But with the onset of Local Law 97 requirements and the state goals that Steve had spoken about, decarbonization is no longer optional for all large buildings in New York City, and the market is trying to catch up. In working with the chair's office, CPD drew a line in the sand in 2020 to no longer accept replacements in kind, and at a minimum decouple domestic hot water from central plants. We will no longer be running our campus steam boilers to produce hot water in the summer, and this alone will drop our carbon emissions by about 10%. In many cases, we are electrifying the hot water makers. We've also installed temperature controls at 45 properties through our energy performance contracts, and this will help us with even more steam distribution to even the steam distribution and reduce overheating. But moving forward, our goal is to pursue complete electrification, which includes removing gas stoves or hydronic conversions for a two-step electrification process, or geothermal energy where geographic conditions are optimal. Next slide, please. The reason you keep hearing me speak about heat and hot water is because these systems make up approximately 65% of total energy use. And many of these systems, as you know, are at the end of their useful lives here at NYCHA. I know you've heard the chair speak about the funding. We're pursuing significant funds and really specifically to recapitalize these assets. And while we will do that while decarbonizing our buildings. As we move toward complete electrification, the in-apartment electric use will have an important role to play in how we upgrade our electrical infrastructure. In my previous civil service role at the water utility as director of demand management, I studied customer behavior for about a decade. And I can tell you that customers that got a direct bill versus those that never saw one, on average, were always much more efficient. Today, only 6% of NYCHA residents, customers, are direct metered, and the median value of master metered electric consumption is about 4 times higher than those that are direct metered. Next slide.
So,
as you've
oh, sorry. You can go, Vlada.
One more slide. I'm sorry, Steve. I just want to cover and say that you've heard Steve say the energy group in NYCHA has lived in various forms for about 15 years, and we've seen some really meaningful gains. We've seen about a 17% reduction since 2005. But we still have a lot of work to do in front of us, right? By 2030, we have to reduce by 50%, by 40%, by 2050, it's an 80% reduction. And so at this, I'd like to hand it over back to you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Vlada. I think the key here is that, and we're going to be showing some of these examples, we need to make some deep retrofits to hit our target goals. And we've already set up the program and the roadmap to do it, and we're on course to do that. The next slide, please. So what are we doing right now? And this is kind of some images that are across our portfolio. The image on the left, the upper left-hand corner there is the Scotch Marine boiler. That's our typical steam pipe plant that's in a recovery and resiliency project. But we're doing other things. The second slide is a recapturing box. We installed this at Farragut Houses, and we actually made it in the field. And what it's doing is it's recapturing steam rather than throwing it down the drain, which requires adding new water, heating it up, chemically treating it, which is it's a cost as well as the ability to reuse that. We understand our infrastructure is older, and so where we're not able to redo all of the infrastructure, we're doing these belts and suspenders in order to help us along. The next slide, or the next image over, not the slide, the next image over is one of the instantaneous hot water heaters that we put in with the city's mayoral heating plant program. And I want to tell a little bit of a story on the one to the right of that. We talk a lot about risk management throughout a construction project. This is at Morris 1 and Morris 2. We were falling behind in our schedule due to permits, getting the permits, getting the contract set. And so what we did was, instead of doing the piping in place, we actually were doing the piping at the same time period in a factory. And so once we were able to get the permits and allowed to go into the construction site, we took this whole entire unit pre-assembled and put it onto the wall, and saved all of the time that we would have done that in the field and got ourselves back on schedule. And that's something that Capital is doing regularly throughout the process, as there is an ebb and flow in construction and construction scheduling. The images down on the left-hand side, this is at Fort Independence. This is actually one of our newer air source heat pump projects. This is with the NYSERDA Clean Energy Program. And we're actually providing heat and cooling for the residents at Fort Independence. This is the top floor program. Resiliency is the next image there, and that is where we're looking at moving a lot of these pieces of equipment above grade. As we have just even learned with Ida, there are not only the flood tides, but we have a climate that's changing, and we need to be able to make sure that everything that we're putting in is resilient for that next generation. Can you please go to the next slide? So this is our heating pipeline right now. We have 72 current heating plant projects in design, procurement, construction, and closeout. 12 are just completed now. In 2001, by the end of the year, we'll have another 6. And by 2022 and 23, we're going to hit another 27. And let me just give you some context. In 2014 and prior to that, NYCHA was only funded to do 1 or 2 heating plants a year. So you can imagine, just in a short period of time, with the funding that we have received, we're able to do a lot more with our heating systems. Can you please move to the next slide? So we've been talking a little bit about the roadmaps and what we're doing today, but where do we need to go into the future in order to get the carbon reductions and meet the benchmarks that we need to make? We're going to look at our entire portfolio. And we don't just look at heating plants, we look at everything. If we're doing a mayor's action plan for lighting, we made sure that those were all LEED and LED lights, so that way we had an energy decrease in the lighting loads. When we were doing the mayor's roofing program, we made sure that we were putting in the highest amount of insulation as per code, so that way we could decrease the amount of heat that's going out of our buildings, and make sure that the materials that we had the longest warranties on them, so that way we're not having to replace those and fill them into landfills. But it's going to take everything. As Vlada has mentioned, it's going to be taking sub-metering, smart ACs, heat pumps, hydronic systems, in essence, an entire portfolio of thinking to get us to our goals. The next slide, please. One of the things that we're doing right now is the building management systems, or the BMS. You may have heard of us speak about this at some of the board meetings. This is the BMS heating system for Whitman. It's an intelligent, transparent control network that links the individual pieces of a building equipment so that they can operate as one complete program. Our BMS systems monitor temperatures. It also monitors all of the different control points to the heating plant. We're also monitoring roof exhausts installed by Capital. We're monitoring exterior lighting. We're monitoring elevators, and we're piloting a program in which we monitor compactors. With heating alone, we can monitor not just the buildings, but all of the components and what makes up the entire heating system, identify issues, be alerted to anomalies, and act either remotely or dispatch staff with all of this information. It's a great tool for us. Can you please move to the next slide? You've heard the metaphor by us in regards to the boiler as being the heart. And if the veins don't work, the blood doesn't get to our extremities. Interior and exterior distribution doesn't work, the heat will not equally distribute throughout the building, and we're going to either overheat or underheat certain sections of it. Capital is leveraging its funds. So on all of those heating plants that we were showing earlier, where we have underground steam distribution issues, we're making those corrections so that way the steam can move more efficiently. If we are going with steam, in the heating plants that we're going away from steam, we're getting rid of those systems altogether. But where we have steam on the inside, we have a steam system optimization, and there's a proof of concept. We did the steam optimization at Washington houses that showed an energy savings of 24% of the heating load, and that didn't include the hot water or the electrical. The optimization solves the interior distribution and it prolongs the life of the boiler. So capital planning within Capital is working to secure funds within our next federal amount, so that way we can do this optimization at all of the heating plants that will have steam. The next slide, please. I mentioned this earlier, but when it comes to our program, right now we design a lot around component replacements. It's how the funding is assigned to us. And what we are doing in Capital is we're really trying to align it. We can't just put our blinders on and treat each program separately. We have to think about this as a holistic approach. We can't afford to do the blinder thing. So each project that we do at Capital gets us closer and closer to the overall goals of the agency. Many of these move on to do other things. So the image on the right is part of our air conditioning pilot program. We had a proof and a concept that worked. And then when the mayor provided the COVID AC program funds, we used this pilot program and expanded it for all of those. So all of the AC units that the mayor's office has provided are part of this smart technology where we can monitor electrification within our buildings. The next slide, please. And Vlada will talk a little bit about our electrification program.
Thank you, Steve. I'll now speak about building technologies and retrofits that we think are needed to get us to decarbonize our buildings, assuming that the electric grid continues to green. You know that the New York State is investing enormous amounts of funds in renewable energy such as solar, offshore wind, and hydropower. And because of that, the best decarbonization path is electrification. So we are doing just that at 1471 Watson Avenue in the Bronx. There are a couple of reasons for why we selected this building. This building is getting energy retrofits through our weatherization assistance program. We were already slated to improve the building envelope and replace windows along with lights and ventilation. And at the same time, we were approached by AEA and PACT, who many of you know, who suggested to donate heat pumps and electric induction stoves as a part of the package. We happily said yes. And we're also able to identify an untapped city funding stream. And really, I think the key here is that we were able to blend funding to take this holistic approach to complete electrification. I know the chair was very interested in installation of the point of use domestic hot water heaters that electrifies the hot water usage. And so we are able to present this package, and this will be our first completely electrified building. It is important to point out that the heat pump on the right top that you see in a picture is a product that exists today, but will require wall penetrations. And this particular building has AC sleeves, and we will be able to avoid putting any more holes in our building envelope. We don't want any more leaks in our buildings, right? So this building, this is another reason for why we selected Watson Avenue as a perfect candidate for this complete electrification project. We do have three other buildings that are, or three other developments rather, that have AC sleeves, and we can pursue complete electrification very quickly. So the work will start on this building in the fall of 2022. Next slide, please. Another project that we've been extremely excited about and have been executing with the technical support from NYSERDA is our retrofit New York project at Ravenswood. This project employs the European energy sprung approach of pursuing net zero energy strategies. A large component of the scope in the project is in the panelized cladding. The panels will be manufactured to include insulation, windows, heating and cooling systems built into the panels. We are also incorporating solar PV to get us as close to net zero as possible. We've done a lot of work with the residents in explaining the designs and selecting the colors for the panels. This really is a golden standard of energy retrofits, but is still very expensive in the US. Our hope is that the infrastructure bill funds, reconciliation bill funds that Greg was speaking about can pursue this level of excellence in many of our buildings and really create a market in the Northeast for this particular technology. This market does not necessarily exist in the United States just yet. Also, if that option is not available, we shouldn't discount more affordable options for recladding and insulating our buildings. For example, the cladding work that was done at Baychester, this will yield energy savings, and really it looks great. All right, let's move on to the next slide. The other exciting body of work in our department has been working with NYSERDA again to bring to market a tall buildings technology, affordable technology solution for space heating and cooling that does not require wall penetrations and is compatible with our building management systems that Steve has described, is easy to install and does not require significant electric infrastructure upgrades in our buildings. We also want it to look good and not obstruct the window visibility or functionality. So you see that image on the bottom left. We've partnered with NYSERDA and NYPA to bring such product to market. NYSERDA hired an expert to develop specifications, which we finished working on last month and are moving into procurement phase of the R&D project. So our hope is to test and receive a viable product in the next year and follow with installations at 3 developments. This is our sort of small guarantee to the market.
Real quick, I just want to say that this is really, really exciting and something that I'm very proud of the energy group, because this little item to the side is a mock-up. They took an existing piece of equipment that's out there and retrofitted into some sort of mock-up based on a think tank that we had, and are creating now through NYSERDA's and grants something that's going to be market ready that could be done throughout the country. And the images on the left are a little bit of what that might look like in the future, but this is all kind of spearheaded out of energy and sustainability, and it's really interesting. One more item to this is the possibilities outside of capital are fairly great. These plug into a regular socket. 110 volts. And if you can imagine, we could do this as an emergency piece. So if all of a sudden you had heating end in a building, instead of having temporary boilers that have to show up at the side and funnel through the system, we could have these, bring them to the sites, install them in each of the windows, and immediately have heat for our residents during an emergency. So the concept of this is even greater than what capital is. Sorry, Vlada.
No, thank you for that input, Steve. I appreciate it. If we go to the next slide, I do want to tie this to the CPD Energy and Sustainability is working with CompMod and real estate development teams to coordinate on technologies and approaches, also the lessons learned that are coming out of our energy team. In the end, our special provision in the local law 97 is that NYCHA has to demonstrate carbon reductions across its portfolio, which does include PACT and its properties. So this, of course, is different for us compared to all the other large properties that will need to comply with local law 97. Okay, next slide, please. I don't want to walk away without highlighting our solar program, particularly because we're doing our part in greening the electric grid, but more so because we are very proud of this unique program. Our sustainability agenda goal is to generate 30 megawatts of renewable energy on NYCHA properties, and we aim to achieve that through the community shared access solar program that you see in the picture here, that those are panels installed in Queensbridge houses. And we are also exploring other pathways like the Retrofit New York program I talked about, and the future EPCs. Our ESCOs are coming back with some proposals which will include solar. But the other important elements of our solar programs, we very specifically designed it to raise revenue. We did choose to do the solar roof leases. Some past analyses showed that that we can generate almost double compared to traditional PPAs. This funding goes back directly to the operational funds of the developments where the solar arrays are sited. And the centerpiece of this program is to connect NYCHA residents to green jobs, but by mandating this in the solicitation. So today we have 25 NYCHA residents who have trained and have been hired through this program in the solar careers. Okay, so Steve spoke about the release of the sustainability agenda. One really important piece that will be presented in the sustainability agenda is the dynamic GIS map. I have snapshots of it here on the screen. And we do think this is going to be a very powerful tool, both for capital and comprehensive modernizations and PACT. It includes all NYCHA properties. We've done an extensive analysis to look at our portfolio and work with the utilities to identify how we can sort of cut at all the various options that are out there. Very specifically, Greg said to me when I started in my role that he wants to see one or two technologies. The saving grace of NYCHA has been the fact that we do have one or two technologies across our portfolio, and we want to keep it that way. We want to be able to train our staff to maintain these systems, and so it is important that we, as we move forward, we maintain that consistency. And so the way that we arrived at this map is we worked with the utilities to identify locations where our properties are surrounded by high pressure gas. And because the space heat technologies, again, if this funding that Greg spoke about arrives in 60 days or a year, the space heating technologies are not market ready. The domestic hot water technologies are ready, but space heating, not quite there yet. There are no affordable or elegant solutions that are available to tall buildings. So we will need to go through a two-step electrification process, and we identified those buildings that would go through a hydronic conversion and prepare the building for building level heat pump by installing a condensing boiler and installing fan coil throughout the building, and then preparing it for being able to swap out that boiler later on when the technology is available. We also worked through a mapping exercise and looking at proximity to bedrock and groundwater, and identified all the locations where geothermal heat pumps will be ideal at the property. So we identified a couple of handfuls of those properties. And then everything else we slated for in terms of a space heat method for the window heat pumps that we spoke about earlier. And those are all the locations that are on the left in that map. So we are going to make this map public. What it will do is it will allow utilities to plan their grid and prepare for our buildings to electrify or convert to hydronic. So that's a very, very important piece of information that utilities don't have and really need, especially on this scale, to be able to plan their investments in the systems. It will also signal to the market what NYCHA plans to do. So that's extremely important. The other piece of this is that we don't want to miss the moment here. We're developing all this new technology. We know that NYSERDA also has funds for training and employment and wraparound support. So we've partnered with the Fund for Public Housing and Paula, who is actually here, to create a Clean Energy Academy. And that's something that, again, we don't want to miss the opportunity for NYCHA residents to participate in the clean energy transition. I'll wrap it up with that and I'll let Steve cover 2 last slides. Thank you very much.
I know, Jacqueline, we're over by 2 minutes, but we'll be quick.
Sure.
Last year, we released the award-winning Connected Communities Guidebook with New York City Department of City Planning. And there have been a number of spin-offs, but what I feel is groundbreaking for Capital Projects Division is that we've created a stakeholder standard procedure, a stakeholder engagement standard procedure. This is going to better assist in the transparency, the coordination, and the relationships that we have and able to move our projects forward. Just as an example of that, right now, we have a heating plant at Smith Houses, and in the conference room right next door to me is the Tenant Association of Smith Houses, who are going through the drawings and specifications that we've presented to them. And they wanted the opportunity to see those drawings and specifications before they go out to bid, and we've done that. And there are many, many more examples. The relationships that we're having with the residents has been really what I feel important, but also a great relationship that's being built right now with Capital. And then the last slide is that Energy Department is part of the CPD family, and energy relies on the capital planning. It relies on our estimating department. It relies on construction administration to manage contracts, design, project management, field operations, and quality assurance. We have absorbed energy and sustainability so that way it's integral to everything that we're doing at Capital to make sure that we can meet and hit our goals. When I was going to architecture school many, many years ago, the concept of energy and sustainability was a thought within the future. And today, in essence, every time that you go to the design board, you have to be thinking about energy and sustainability for climate change, as well as operations and maintenance. The last slide is our Q&A slide. I just want to say that I'm extremely proud of the great work that Vlada's team is doing, energy as well as all of Capital, and very proud of the staff and our partners, which are program managers and architects and engineers and construction managers and special inspectors and sister agencies, as well as all of the other divisions at at NYCHA that help us. As you can see, we're doing a lot, and we can't do this alone. And so we do appreciate all the partnerships. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Steve.
Steve. Thank you, Vlada. Questions?
Steve, good morning. Steve,
Yes.
Steve,
Go
can you hear
ahead.
me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Steve,
Board
good
Member
morning.
Rams.
Yeah, you just said about when you was architecture school. So today's your lucky day because I'm 3 years removed from John Jay and my master's degree, and I had to do a 37-page paper on this. And how I got the passing grade, top grade of this is I had to use the public housing synopsis on how this works and how this doesn't work. So this, I didn't hear anything in your presentation about roadblocks or possible things that might or might not work. You did mention one thing about having to take the part of the equipment and make it outside because there's spacing issues. You cannot do this inside some of the buildings that we have because it takes up a lot of space. That's just one issue. The fuel is better than fossil. The energy is better than fossil fuels, but there is some, if I'm not mistaken, there is some, emission of greenhouse gases in use of systems similar to this. So it's not just a gimme. I'm not going to time the rest of the meeting with it, but there are just numerous things, offhand from my research and stuff about this low efficiency levels and, and how it can be unreliable at times. I'm not saying that's the case here, but when you have a presentation like this, I'm just waiting to hear that, facto saying, well, there are some roadblocks or something. You just gave me the beautiful diamond ring on one hand. On the other hand, there might be a couple of fingers missing. So there's no honeymoon and there's no wedding. So I'm trying to figure out, when a presentation like this takes place, where's a little bit of pain or roadblocks or something that gives me, say, okay, he gave me two dynamics. So now I can understand what might not go wrong or what might be a problem with. And there's also an issue with the vendors and people who have to support. A lot of the vendors that have to be in place to get the panels and to get the things that need to get these things running. I'm not going to, what I would like to see is the places where you've completed this, what are the heating numbers there? As far as outages, service, where these things have been installed, because in a thesis paper, you have to make an argument. And that argument is why something is good and why it's not good, and take a position. I'm not saying this is not good. This is a very difficult task to take in a public housing setting. In rural areas, it's more effective, in my opinion. I'm not saying it's not going to work, but there's so many things going against it. And that is my opinion. And that's all I have to say. And I like to see some numbers or something to support how feasible it's been since you've got some of these things in place.
So thank you very much, Board Member Adams. There's a couple of items that I'll just quickly hit, and we can have a conversation. We can have more conversations. One, we're constantly monitoring risk. Everything from the state and the federal government moving to a green grid. That is an important piece that makes all of this work. And we sit within those meetings and hear about the funding that's happening on the federal and the state level, and the work that the federal and the state and the city level are doing to get us to those green grids. There's also the risks, as you mentioned, just in the construction of all of this. Roofing this year was very, very difficult for us because ISO boards, the insulation boards that we use to get our R values, are in high demand. And we are managing all of the risk around that to make sure that we can get the roofs on. And we have to do things like contact the actual suppliers and manufacturers beyond who the roofer is, to make sure that we're getting those materials and supplies to us. And then, of course, there's the lessons learned that we are constantly doing. The lessons learned, for example, on the steam and building out the little steam recapturing pieces. That was happening as we were installing these products in a development in which had some steam pipes that will be replaced with funding in the future, but we needed to take care of some issues immediately. And those are the lessons learned when we learn from that, and then we can apply it to other pieces. In terms of the numbers, we would love to get you the numbers. We have consultants who have built a very, very cool software system for us in which we can monitor and as well project savings, as well as our carbon footprint and other items. So that way we can make really good decisions now in the planning, because again, as you build these things out and get the funding for it, it's a period of time, and we don't want to be behind the 8 ball 3 years, 4 years, 10 years down the road. That said, technology is constantly changing, and we hope that some of the technology is going to get better and better and better. I will give the example of batteries. Originally, batteries were difficult for everybody. They did not perform as well as what the industry needed. And not only that, we were creating large environmental problems in other countries where we were surface mining the material to build those batteries. But that technology is being changed. And we're getting to a point where batteries are something that we can use for things like generators or solar panels, other heating systems that we're doing. And so again, technology is always going to change. But thank you very much for bringing up the aspect of risk and risk management that we deal with every day, the lessons learned, and we can sit down with you and show you some of the numbers that get us to those carbon ratings, that get us to those energy savings in the future.
Yes, Steve, I just want to see the numbers, like if building A, you put it in, what were the heating outages before you put it in, the year before, compared to now? And you mentioned batteries. The average battery for one of these units goes from $10,000 to $25,000 just to put it in. Not to say if it's going to work. So I did this 3 years ago. I just got this degree. I'm telling you, I got a top grade in this, and it took me 6 to 7 weeks. My project was a little late, but I'm telling you, I'm pretty familiar with this aspect of it. So the batteries, the panels, the training that's involved, just if you can just give me some numbers where you put it in, where it made a difference, that'll be enough. I want to take the baby, burp it, and hand it back to you. Okay, you know I like to use these terms so we keep it simple. All right, that's all I want is to see the numbers where it worked so far. Okay, I'm not saying that it won't, but it hasn't proven to be successful in other cities, in other facilities, in a large complex like this. So just give me some numbers where it worked, and we can talk another time. Thanks, Steve.
Yep. Thank you very much, Board Member.
All right. Thank you.
Steve, just a reminder to please send any information directly to my office, and it will be distributed to all board members.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes,
Okay.
there is.
Member
Yes, there
Gonzalez,
is.
Vice Chair.
Okay. Steve, I gotta really applaud you and Vlada on this work that you guys are doing. I mean, I think it's very aggressive. I think it's about time. I think it's modern, and I think we need it. So in that aspect, I'm all for this. The only questions that I have is, you will meet some challenges because there are developments where you cannot put in this modern BMS that you described quite clearly, which is great. And many of the NYCHA developments aren't prepared to take on this particular type of management system. But having said that, while you're lowering or attempting to lower the carbon reduction, the carbon usage and lowering it, the ultimate goal as far as boilers, as far as heating systems, as far as the gas that you use or won't use, have we come to a conclusion as to what's going to be the ultimate goal in all of those topics? Are they going to go strictly to this, strictly to that? And if so, where is it going to work? Have you calculated where it's going to work and where it's not going to work?
Victor, thank you very much for that question. So one size does not fit all. We have an amazing portfolio of high-rise, campus, scattered sites, mid-rise, and as Vlada explained in the electrification, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit about the mapping program, is that it's there is a set of tools in our tool chest. For example, solar panels. You need a large area that you can produce the solar to make it viable for those contracts. We could do it at Queensbridge, but we might not be able to do it at, or I know we can't do it at other sites, and we've mapped which sites are viable and which ones aren't. and then we can partner up to have it done at certain sites. So you're absolutely right. BMS doesn't necessarily work at all of the sites, just like some of the heating systems don't necessarily work at all the sites. The electrification program was perfect to get all of our leveraging of funds. That was a great example of leveraging of our funds, different funding sources to make that one work. But if it had one or two elements not that we had at that site, we might not have been able to choose that site, and we'd have to choose another site. And so we go through that process. But the idea is, again, we've been talking about carbon reduction, and we've been talking about electrification, utility use reduction. The key also here, and is number one, it's about quality heat and hot water. And in many of the systems that we're putting in today, we're going beyond heat and we're going to cooling, because we think it's very important that with climate change and the hotter and longer summers, that we need to provide cooling as well for our residents. And so a lot of the systems are heating and cooling. But the idea is that we've got to provide for the residents and meet our goals. And we're going to do that, simultaneously as we build out those roadmaps and those models. But you're absolutely right. One size does not fit all. And Vlad, if you'd like to mention anything about the map again, or add to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Steve and Chair Gonzalez. I think that you hit the nail on the head there. In some ways, we do have to be prescriptive, but the approaches will be different for different buildings. So the map that we created is a planning tool. It's going to allow us, as we ask for funding and as we work with our PACT partners, to make decisions around how we would approach heating and hot water systems. But it also keeps in mind that the technologies right now, there's just a rapid evolution of technologies because of Local Law 97. And the targets are, as you asked, are really dictated by this law. We don't really have a choice. The city overall doesn't have a choice. We don't have penalties built into the law, and in some ways we have a little bit more flexibility, but other buildings throughout New York City that are 25,000 square feet large or bigger, right? They will see pretty hefty penalties for not complying with the law and not showing the carbon reductions. And those reductions are, 40% by 2030, which is very soon, and 80%, which is essentially net zero, right? It's very close to net zero by 2050. And so we're in a moment where we have to work together with the state, with other agencies, to make sure that the grid is taking us in the direction. If we are electrifying our buildings, we better know that the grid is greening if we, decided to go in that direction. So it's going to be a very complicated dance with many, many players.
Excuse me. Hi, I have a question for her.
I'm not done yet, Joe.
I'm sorry. Okay, Vic, I apologize.
I'm not done yet. So in hitting with that is, again, I go to the other portions that you mentioned, boilers, which is a very, very important issue that we've been having for years. And again, let me reiterate, I love what you guys are doing, and I give you kudos on all of that. But after experiencing boilers and some of the issues that have happened, I love that new technology that you come in and you can plug in, and it'll provide the residents with heating or cooling, whatever the aspect is. Again, what I'm looking for is at each of these intervals, like boilers, where are you going with boilers? Stoves, where are you going with stoves? This whole carbon footprint that we're attempting to clean up, I know it's got to be a culmination of different things, but that's what I would like to see, how you're going to address those particular aspects going into the future, while you're still and have that incorporated in this wonderful, massive undertaking that you are doing now.
Chair Gonzalez,
So-
when the map becomes public, you'll be able to click on each one of the properties and it will explain the plan or the aspirations, assuming that we'll get the levels of funds that we're all talking about here for complete electrification versus hydronic conversions versus geothermal. And so you'll be able to click on each one of the properties and it will explain the scope of where we would like to move these properties into based on the geographic conditions, et cetera. So there's been a lot of thinking that's already been done based on the calculator that Steve had mentioned that calculates carbon reductions. It will also show thermal loads of the potential conversions. So that information will be public.
Okay, thank you. And these laws, I really believe that these laws, as far as I'm concerned, are an impediment as opposed to something that should be give us the reins so that we can take care of these problems that everyone is complaining about. But no one knows that these laws are sort of have us handcuffed in moving forward. And it would be something that if other people or these naysayers would know about these laws that are keeping us from doing the right thing, I think that would be fruitful or useful.
Okay, so we're running low on time, so I need any other board member who has not yet asked a question with regard to this topic. Do you have a question? Paulo or Matt, Magali, any questions? Hello?
At the moment, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
This is Paula. This is Paula.
Yes, Paula.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to compliment and recognize the comprehensiveness of this strategy and particularly the coordination aspect with all capital projects as well as other initiatives. So I just wanted to both recognize and compliment the comprehensiveness. Thank you.
Okay, thank Member Austin. Thank you, Paula.
Madam Secretary,
Excuse me, Member Adams. Member Austin, any questions?
I have no questions, but I want to second what Paula's comments. Thank you so much for this fantastic presentation.
Thank you, Member Austin. Member Adams, you
Yes,
can close it. Mhm.
yeah, that's last point. Something of this magnitude, as a person that lives in these developments and have lived there, I'm just looking for something that y'all might have touched on that not necessarily negative, but the challenges. Everything was, very, very well done. But unless you've lived in these developments many years like we have and had these challenges, at least from a fairness standpoint, I would like to hear a little glazing over what challenges y'all might have faced, like the political aspects, stocks, investments. There's just various things. I just researched this about. I'm just saying, it would just been nice to hear that. That would give me a fair perspective saying, okay, they recognize there's going to be problems. And going forward, that's all I'm just saying. So again, I'll look forward to see the numbers of what has been productive, and thank you. That's it.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, board members, for your questions. Thank you, Steve and Vlado, for your presentation. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. So we'll move on to our second presentation. It's a PACT update and resident engagement overview. And it's being co-presented by Simon Kowitsky, VP, and Heather Beck, Senior Policy Analyst from Portfolio Planning of the Real Estate Development Department, and Leroy Williams, Director of Community Development. Simon, Heather, and Leroy, please proceed.
Actually, good morning, everybody. I believe Jonathan is going to kick us off.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Thank
Jonathan.
you for the opportunity to present today. We wanted to give you an update on where we stand with PACT, both in terms of the numbers and our progress, but also most importantly on our efforts around enhancing engagement and resident involvement in the PACT process. So just I wanted to set at the outset, back in late 2018, the mayor and NYCHA committed to converting 62,000 units through PACT over 10 years. By the end of this year, we will have 30,000 units in some stage of the process, either from construction completed to the procurement process. And Simon and team are going to get into some more details, but that's really great progress in a relatively short period of time. So we're ahead of schedule. But as I said, it's not just about the numbers, it's about the process, it's about the engagement. And our team in real estate, the portfolio planning team in particular, has done a lot of work with Leroy and his team in bolstering what we're doing around engagement. And really not just doing engagement for the sake of engagement, but really bringing in resident views and involvement into the process and helping us shape the projects. So with that, I'll turn it over to Simon, Leroy, and Heather.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and good morning, board members. We can advance to the next slide, please. So just really quickly, today we're going to provide a very brief refresher on the PACT program. We're going to talk a little bit about our current community planning approach and give a high-level overview of all the progress we have made to date. And at the end, if time allows, we'll have some questions as well. Next slide, please. So PACT stands for Permanent Affordability Commitment Together, and it's one of the main tools that we have at NYCHA for making comprehensive repairs to our developments. As Jonathan mentioned, in 2018, NYCHA committed to using PACT to rehabilitate a full third of our housing stock, or approximately 62,000 apartments. And our funding shortages are well known by many as well as the board, but I wanted to share this chart. We often use it in presentations with residents, and it's rather powerful. The blue bars represent the estimated cost of fully modernizing NYCHA's housing stock, and that cost has ballooned from 2006, when we needed only about $6.6 billion to repair our buildings, and 2017, when that cost was estimated to be at $31.8 billion. Today, in 2021, we estimate that cost to fully modernize our portfolio to be over $40 billion. The orange bars on the chart here reflect the level of funding that we actually receive from the federal government each year to make major repairs to our buildings. And you can see how it really pales in comparison to the extraordinary need that we do have. And truly, that need has grown exponentially in recent years, precisely because we are forced to defer those important upgrades and repairs. So PACT makes use of HUD's Rental Assistance Demonstration, or RAD, and it works essentially by changing the source of funding from Section 9, or the traditional public housing program, to the project-based Section 8 program. Both programs are funded by the federal government and managed by HUD. But unlike the public housing program, which is subject to annual congressional allocations, and as we know, has failed to meet the needs of our properties over the years, the project-based Section 8 program comes with increased annual subsidy and a 20-year contract from HUD that must, under law, be renewed in perpetuity. This contract is what allows us to take out a loan to make those comprehensive repairs. And under the PACT model, that loan is a loan from the City of New York's Affordable Housing Finance Agency. HUD must approve each of our transactions, and in exchange for allowing us to convert to this more lucrative Section 8 contract, we must commit to addressing all documented repair needs at each development, while also maintaining permanent affordability and ensuring resident rights and protections are preserved. These are fundamental requirements of the RAD program. We've made a number of different enhancements to these requirements as part of the way that we implement RAD here in New York City via PACT. Next slide, please. PACT works through public-private partnerships. Under the PACT model, NYCHA leases the land and buildings to private and nonprofit development partners. They conduct all of the necessary repairs. They serve as the new on-site property manager, and they provide enhanced social services and community programs to our residents. NYCHA's role changes. So while residents will now go to their new property manager to do things like file repair and maintenance requests, NYCHA continues to manage the federal Section 8 subsidy. Residents continue to come to NYCHA to certify their income, and NYCHA sets their rents. NYCHA is also responsible for tenanting any vacant apartments using our Section 8 waitlist that we establish. And we also regularly monitor conditions at all of our developments to ensure that our partners are performing well. Wherever needed, we can step in to resolve any issues that may arise between our residents and the new property management team. We can even remove and replace the new manager for any breach of the agreements that they sign with us. So fundamentally, PACT developments remain NYCHA properties, and our residents remain NYCHA residents. But this is all under a new model that brings in the skills, expertise, and resources of private partners. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, in exchange for approving conversion to the Section 8 program, HUD requires that we address all documented repair needs at our developments. So PACT is comprehensive in nature, and we work closely with residents to prioritize investments that meet their community's needs. And at a high level, these are the key focus areas that we work in. So sites and grounds, including our public plazas, playgrounds, landscaped areas, pedestrian areas, and lighting and security systems. Our buildings, including our lobbies, our hallways, stairwells in residential buildings, but also our community centers. Building systems, such as our heat and hot water plants, our roofs, facades, elevators, and electrical equipment. And last but not least, apartments, where we typically replace all kitchens, all bathrooms, flooring, and windows. Through the program, we really are able to address many of the root causes that are plaguing so many of our residents day in and day out, including things like mold, leaks, and pests. Rather than just doing Band-Aid fixes, because we are mobilized on site and doing all of this work all at the same time, this is our chance to do that important work behind the walls, for example, like replacing old leaking pipes or upgrading our electrical, making our developments more energy efficient. I'll also say that any lead paint, asbestos, or other hazardous materials must be abated during the course of this work. And most renovations happen while residents remain in their homes. Again, if there is hazardous work taking place, or if someone requires an accommodation because of a health concern or disability, we make furnished hospitality units available within each development, and residents can stay there as long as needed for the work to be completed in their home. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, HUD also requires that we preserve all resident rights and protections. These are some of the protections that are most important to residents, and I won't belabor them, but I'll go through them very quickly. Number one, rent is going to continue to be capped at 30% of a household's income. All resident associations continue to have the right to organize, as well as receive their tenant participation funding. All residents have the right to renew their leases. And really importantly, their applications are not rescreened. What this means is that any existing public housing resident transitioning into the PACT program, into project-based Section 8, does not need to independently qualify for the program. If their income is too high or their family composition would otherwise disqualify from Section 8 if they were applying as a new applicant, that doesn't matter. They automatically are allocated a voucher and their home is included in the program. All the same permissions in terms of being able to add relatives and household members, permanent and temporary, onto family leases is still permitted under PACT. Certain members will be able to have succession rights. There is a very similar grievance hearing process in the Section 8 program. And really importantly, the Section 3 program applies to PACT. So we're required through our partners to reserve 30% of all work hours for NYCHA residents as a priority, either in the construction or property management and maintenance of the developments over the long term. Next slide, please. One of the reasons that we're so excited about PACT is because it is a proven model that has been working. As you can see on this slide, we've already completed or begun comprehensive repairs at 49 developments comprising over 9,500 apartments all throughout the city. And collectively among these homes, we're investing about $1.8 million right now. We're also currently in the planning stages at another 49 developments comprising about 22,500 apartments, where we hope to begin investing an additional $4.3 billion in those homes over the coming years. Next slide, please. And I'm going to spend a little more time at the end of the presentation going through where we are in each of those projects. Because these are really such transformative investments, it's critical for residents to have a seat at the table, as Jonathan said, and help us shape the plans to meet the goals and priorities that our residents have for their communities. NYCHA truly is not capable of making these kinds of decisions in a vacuum. We need partnerships with our residents and our resident leaders, and we seek them out every step of the way. To guide our work, we crafted a series of principles that we keep at the front of our minds always for how we can run successful planning processes in partnership with our residents. So first, residents are the experts about their communities. We all know that. Their expertise must be centered and respected. We often think here within our department here of residents as our clients. It's our job to provide them with high quality customer service. Second, residents must be supported with technical resources. While many residents have the necessary expertise and knowledge to participate in planning for real estate investments, we've heard from many others that they would like additional support, whether it's technical, legal, or otherwise, to allow them to more meaningfully engage, make informed decisions, and make the best use of their time. Third, the planning process must be transparent and consistent. By establishing clear goals and milestones at the outset of every process, our hope is that residents will know how best to plug in, how to inform decisions, and again, be efficient with their own limited time. We're involved in so many different processes all across the city, and it's really important that they're all rigorous and they all are held to the same standards and they're all consistently being implemented. Lastly, we're continuing, we're going to talk a little bit more about all of these strategies in just a few moments, but we're continuing to update our communications materials, as well as employ a whole range of different strategies. The goal is really to make sure residents have access to clear, accessible information about these projects in a variety of different media and different forums, and also ensuring they have access to resources where they can turn to for help. Next slide, please. This is what our typical community planning process looks like. Each column reflects a different phase, and each phase can really range in duration from several months to several years, depending on the project. But within each column or each phase, I've tried to summarize some of the key goals and engagement activities that take place at that stage of the process. So in the very beginning, when we're just kicking off a process, we call this the listen and learn phase. We're reaching out to our resident associations. We're primarily focused on educating residents about PACT, what the road ahead is supposed to look like, and how their community can get involved. We're spending a lot of time hearing from residents about their needs, the issues they're facing, and challenges at their development. We'll do large introductory meetings with residents. We'll share a whole lot of different information. We'll also start conducting inspections and surveys with residents to really get a better feel for the issues that they're facing. In the design phase, we're trying to go deeper in understanding the community's vision. We're also involving residents in the selection of PACT partners, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Engagement during this phase might include more workshop style events, information sessions on specific topics, which we call the PACT curriculum. We're also here striving to incorporate everything we've learned from residents and through our own research and package that into our bid documents, our requests for proposals that we use to identify partners. We want to make sure that they're crafting proposals that are at the gate in response to what residents have said that they want to see. Once the partners are selected, this is where we really roll up our sleeves and get to work in crafting those detailed rehab, property management, and social services plans. We're continuing to conduct workshops all throughout this phase to meet regularly with resident leadership. We're also now making free legal services available to residents in connection with the new Section 8 leases that they have to sign. We also see trainings and job fairs hosted by our partners in connection with the Section 3 program that I mentioned for any potential job seekers on site. All of these plans are submitted to HUD for approval before we can actually transition to the new property management team and begin construction. And we'll talk again in a few moments about the kinds of services we provide during that construction phase and beyond. Next slide, please. So we're always looking for opportunities to improve the way we work. As Jonathan mentioned, over the past year and a half, we've made a whole range of different changes in the way that we interact with residents, and also in the expectations that we have for our partners in providing that good customer service. So we're going to spend a little bit of time now going through some of these recent changes in more detail. Next slide, please. One of the biggest shifts is that we are now, for the first time, involving resident leaders in the process of selecting our PACT partners. This includes the developers, general contractors, property managers, and social service providers who are going to be working at their development. For each project, we establish a resident review committee at each development, and all committee members must sign a confidentiality agreement that ensures the integrity of the bidding process. But once they do that, they have full access to all of the proposal materials that we see here at NYCHA. Our team works closely with the committee to facilitate a series of meetings where we walk through each proposal and discuss the strengths and weaknesses of each. Residents participate in the interviews with the teams, and they give us feedback on what they like, what they didn't like about each team. This is an opportunity for them to express any preferences or serious issues that they have with any of the teams before selections are made. We can also go back to each team and say, we want you to change this or to change that before we agree to move forward. So with that, I'm going to invite my colleague, Leroy Williams, to speak in more detail about some of the other recent initiatives that I just mentioned on the previous slide. Leroy?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Simon. So the next few slides, I'm going to be talking about advances and the types of engagement that's done during a PACT project. I want to say that, that the PACT curriculum is something that's newly instated for about 1.5 years, where we rotate 3 informational sessions. And it's really came back from feedback from resident association presidents, their boards, and residents overall. These are the points where people really needed to understand more. So we made this rotating informational session so that they can understand on an ongoing basis. So first is talking about the resident rights, responsibilities, and the Section 8 program. So of course, these are the main points of a resident that want to understand what is going to happen to my responsibility and what's going to happen to my rights as I turn into a Section 8 resident. I want to stress that we make sure we do everything that we can do to make sure to get them ready to be a Section 8 participant. We go to many lengths to make sure that they understand it clearly. And I do want to just hold up one of the newly created forms that we have that give a side-by-side of what is the responsibilities, what you're going to be carrying over. As Simon said, we have to make sure that you maintain those responsibilities and those rights. So it's important that we put it in writing. And of course, it's in every language that's spoken in that particular development. Next is the design and construction. So we go more in depth into how do the residents weigh into the overall design and construction that happens during PACT. Again, we update it so that we can make sure that residents really get a feel of, how can I weigh into this process? And lastly, is preparing for PACT development partners. So we make sure that they understand what are the points that each of the partners will do and make sure that they enter into all of the paperwork, all of the agreements, anything that they feel strongly about, we make sure we prepare them for that partnership. Residents at any stage of the process can attend, and we make sure, again, as a rotating informational session, that we get them, excuse me, I'm sorry, is my audio going in and out?
You're fine.
I can hear
okay.
you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just got a message.
Okay.
The sessions are open multiple times throughout the year, so the resident can access information and ask questions on a regular basis. Sessions are recorded, which is very important and was done in the past 1.5 to 2 years, so that there's available online and viewing for residents at their convenience. And then we set up a PACT web page where all of these recordings live to make sure that they have the actual resources and they can go to one place to make sure that they can get the information and not look all over the web for them. Next slide. So as I held up earlier, through the engagement with residents, we we instituted a new PACT informational resources. So instead of putting all the information in a FAQ where it was several pages, we kind of broke it down to different pages. So we have one to talk about generally, what is PACT? You know, how is that going to affect me as a resident overall? We talked about design and construction. Resident rights and responsibilities. Again, we're always going to go back to that because residents always ask the question, would I still be able to ... So we try to make sure that we break it down as seamless as possible. If we have to do one-on-ones with residents, we do that. And I'll talk more about other ways that we communicate with residents. But it's very important to us that all of the collateral that we give out is user-friendly, it's resident-friendly. So we make sure as we update our information, we talk to residents to make sure, is this something that your residents will, you know, react positively or after. We also created a PACT video in which board member Adams knows also well because he was a part of it. And we also use other resident association leadership to take part in this PACT video to make sure that we have something online that lives there to make sure that, again, as residents or an advocate or an elected official have questions and they want to learn more about the PACT process, we have something that's very detailed and make sure that they can get all the information that they need on our PACT page. Next slide. So on our project pages, on our PACT page, we have each project dedicate its own page. So if Mr. Gonzalez, of course, you went through PACT. So on that PACT page, you have the Manhattan bundle, which lays out all of the developments that's under that project and all updated information. It gives general PACT information, the PACT video that we just talked about. The PACT project page itself is an interactive map. It's the ability to find specific developments on a project so that they can, again, right, as a resident, I want to know what's happening at my development and maybe not overall in a specific projects as we bundle developments for PACT projects. It offers resources for residents and also procurement page where residents and advocates can go on to understand the amount of money is being used, what is the money going to be used for, and so forth. Next slide, please. So we talked about PACT outreach and strategies. So we host virtual meetings, typically hosted twice during the morning and evening. It's very important that we want to make sure we reach as many residents as possible anytime that we do a meeting. It's also offered in every language that's spoken in the development simultaneously. Residents can dial in on their phones or via Zoom. So it's very important that, of course, that everyone doesn't have a computer at home. So we make it very friendly, user-friendly, where they can just call in. And then what I want to show you is an actual booklet that no matter what meeting we have, we make sure that every resident receive this booklet before a meeting. So if you're calling in, you can follow through with whoever's presenting to make sure you understand and see the same thing that people see on the computer. It's always in English and Spanish, and then all other languages are located in the management office. At the beginning of all processes, NYCHA conducts phone banking to speak to one-on-one with residents because, of course, everyone doesn't like speaking in front of large crowds. So it's important to contact each resident to explain what's coming to them, if they answer any questions that they may have, and to also invite them to any informational sessions that may be coming up at their development. We institute robocalls as reminders, emails, and flyering conducted in advance of all meetings. We also attend family days, community events, and we instituted open houses at each development where, again, residents can come down to in their developments to ask questions so they get clarity about things. If anyone hasn't come to any of the sessions, they can catch up and understand the process before conversion. Also, residents can have questions answered at any time via the PACT hotline and emails. So any information that we give out, it definitely has and lists the phone number for the hotline and the email. It's checked daily, 2 times a day, and my managers make sure to call every resident back to make sure that their questions are answered or further along the conversation with that particular resident. Next slide. So with all of these conversions being done, it's great work that's being done, but of course we stress upon residents before they convert over that you're still part of the NYCHA family. So community development has engaged residents and, created a new post-conversion unit where its responsibility is to continue the relationship with the resident associations and the residents overall. So they respond to resident issues or complaints received through the resident association, 311, community organizers, elected officials, and other stakeholders. They ensure residents and partners are supported in conducting elections and utilizing TPA funds, which we all know is a task within itself. These activities are meant to complement NYCHA asset management functions. I think that this is a really, really important step in making sure that residents understand that when you convert, this is not something where NYCHA is going to be stepping away because you have a new management or a new developer. We're in a partnership. You know, we have this post-conversion unit that has already been to 3 different projects so far, and they're helping shape how to engage people ongoingly. So, as more and more visits have going to be done, we're able to improve the communications and the partnership between residents. Next slide, and I will turn it over to Heather Beck.
Great, thanks, Leroy. Can everyone hear me through my mask? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Heather.
Yes, you're fine.
My name's Heather Beck. I'm a senior policy analyst here in the real estate department, and I just want to thank you for your time today. So I'm going to give you an update on our PACT resident planning fund, our social services that we provide on site, and the PACT resident stability and retention guidelines that we've created. As one of the goals that Leroy just talked about of the PACT program is to give consistent information, and we talked through our new approach to engagement. But one of the other key goals of the PACT program is to provide residents with technical and legal resources. And one of the ways that we're doing this is through our PACT Resident Planning Fund. As many of you know, the PACT Resident Planning Fund will pair residents with the support of independent third-party professionals during the PACT planning process. With your approval earlier this year, we entered into an agreement with an independent program administration team who will help us develop and implement the program. Public Works Partners, Public Policy Lab, LISC NYC, and the Pratt Center are all members of that program administration team. And we started working with them this summer, and later this fall, the Planning Fund team will start to pilot some of our program model with our resident leaders. And this work will help them to assess opportunities and how we can connect them to assistance, including some of the options that I've listed on the slide. You can go to the next slide. Great. Another critical part of the PACT program are the social services that are enhanced and provided to all the households at the development. We ask residents what enhancements to current programming they'd like to see and what additional services or programming they would like as part of the transition to the Section 8 program. We start these conversations at the very beginning of the planning process. It's critical for us to know what services and service gaps exist, and then all of our PACT partners are required to develop a robust social service plan in response to that feedback and a resident survey that's conducted before the project converts. And our PACT partners also set aside a budget specifically for implementing these services. Social service coordinators at each site help ensure that residents have access to that community-specific programming, and that programming could include services such as healthcare, healthy food programs, economic opportunities, youth programming, eviction prevention and outreach, food pantries, or senior programming. So on this list, or on this slide, we have a list of our current PACT social service providers that work with our residents. And you can see there's quite a few neighborhood groups and citywide groups that are well known in the community. Each year we pre-qualify a large group of providers to be our social service providers, and at new PACT sites we work with our residents and partners to pair them to that site. We can go to the next slide. We're a little short on time. So the last topic I'll cover is about our new resident stability and retention guidelines. We created these guidelines to ensure that resident stability and retention were a key goal during that transition from Section 9 to project-based Section 8. These guidelines require all of our PACT partners to conduct proactive outreach to our households that have arrears or households who are in breach of their lease. Our partners report on their outreach efforts to us monthly through our asset management team. We ask our teams to utilize the social service providers that they have on site as critical partners in their outreach efforts. Our social service providers are often seen as a neutral and trustworthy party. And then during the COVID-19 crisis, we just want to share that all of our partners have followed and will continue to follow the current New York State eviction moratorium guidelines. And that in addition to these guidelines, all residents have access to free legal services and information sessions on how to prepare their household for the transition to Section 8 before the development goes through that transition. So those are the key updates that I want to share, and I'll pass it to Simon.
Thanks, Heather and Leroy. So we can actually go to the next slide. I'm now just going to go through in a little more detail all the progress we're making at specific locations. And I know board members, you have this information already, so I won't spend too much time going through the detail, but I'm happy to take any questions. So this chart here just reflects all of the developments where construction is either ongoing or complete. We all know Ocean Bay Bayside was the first development to go through the program in 2016 that has completed construction, along with Betances and Baychester Murphy. The others are all at various stages of the construction process. Next slide, please. We divide up our projects into what we call rounds. We typically release RFPs for a specific round. So we're awarding or designating teams to undertake the renovations and serve as the new property managers in this sort of progressive manner. The round 8 teams were all designated just before the pandemic. So it's been a little bit slower going in getting through the pre-development process where we can actually begin construction. But all of these projects are expected to begin renovations either by the end of this year or early next year. This reflects about 6,500 apartments and investments of over $1.2 billion across 11 developments. Next slide, please. I'll also say round 8 will result in us actually transitioning to a stable source of funding all of the remaining unfunded developments in our portfolio. So now all of our developments will have that stable source of operating subsidy to make sure that they're well maintained and have access to capital. PACT round 9, we released an RFEI for this group of developments in November of last year. And this is where we've first piloted the participation of the resident review committees in reviewing the proposals with us, taking part in the interviews, and helping us make the selections. We hope to be making announcements about the teams that are being designated for these sites in the coming days, which is very exciting. This represents 17 different developments across 3 distinct projects at Edenwald, Fred Samuel Apartments, and the Reed and Park Rock consolidation in Brooklyn. Next slide. Another project that has been discussed quite frequently in the media and that many people have talked about is Fulton and Elliott Chelsea. There was an initial proposal for these developments, and in October 2019, a working group that was made up of resident leaders, different advocates, and researchers and elected officials' offices all came together to create a working group to actually think through those strategies together with NYCHA on how we can raise the capital necessary to bring comprehensive repairs to these developments. We worked over the course of about 1.5 years on this working group process and actually released a series of recommendations in February of this year. Right off the heels of the release of those recommendations, we worked with resident leaders to actually release an RFP in April of 2021. And we received proposals this summer. We just kicked off the review process with the resident leaders at the Fulton and Elliott Chelsea developments and are really excited about what's in store for these communities. Next slide, please. PACT round 10, we released an RFEI for these properties, 4 projects comprising 17 developments in May of this year. We are expecting proposals back later this month in September. And again, this will be the 3rd set of properties where we'll be convening those resident review committees to start really digging into the proposals and helping us make those selections. Last slide. PACT round 11. This summer, we've been very busy going out to all 28 developments shown here on this slide, meeting with resident associations and giving presentations to the residents at large. A lot of really positive conversations that we've been having, especially as we've been able to go out and actually meet people face to face again, which has been really positive. We expect to release an RFP for these developments this fall and move these forward as well. But this is a very large round, 28 developments, close to 6,000 units, and expecting close to $1 billion in investment. Thank you so much for your time today.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan, Simon, Leroy, and Heather. Great presentation. We're pretty much out of time, so I'm going to take one question per board member, and I'm going to start with the board members who have not yet spoken. So I'm going to ask Member Austin Gawal, do you have any questions on this presentation?
I don't have a question. I'll defer my time to other board members. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. Member Austin?
I don't have a question either.
Thank you. Member Gavin? Paula? Paula, do you have any questions? Paula, you're on mute. Okay. Member Gonzalez?
Here I am. Here I am. Sorry.
That's okay. Do you have
That's
any
right.
questions?
No question. A bit of a statement, a great presentation, amazing progress on resident engagement. And I think what we've learned in the Fulton project will probably be applied going forward. So I just wanted to state that as an assumption in case I'm wrong, but I do think amazing progress on the resident engagement.
Great, thank you. Member Adams?
Yes, I just wanted to say, is Heather still there? Heather?
Yes, she is.
Okay, Heather, good morning. Good afternoon.
I'm here, hi.
Listen, first of all, thank you. It was a pleasure working with you and the young man on this. Your forthrightness to putting language in to let residents know what they'll be facing. You changed things. You kept in contact. The communication was open. The things that you implemented, the comments, the suggestions to let people know that there would be bumps, what they were responsible for was just outstanding. I can't remember his name. I apologize to him. He just mentioned my name too. And it was just amazing how you were able to change that language, even though residents were going to know what's facing them. Because when we're doing something like this, we just can't assume things. They have to be out there,
Mhm.
and so people can read it and understand what they might be facing. And I want to say
Well,
again,
thank you, Mr. Adams.
it was a pleasure, and we're working with y'all and supporting this. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Okay.
look, I want to thank you, Mr. Adams. A lot of that feedback came from you, so it was really helpful and informative.
You're welcome.
Okay. Member Gonzalez.
Since I only have one question and there's a lot of stuff here that, well, let me just put whatever I can in the one question and then hopefully I can get an answer. Number one, a great presentation, is very informative. And I see that you've changed the format from the original format that you had as I had conversations with Jonathan Gouvier. So my question is, and I'm gonna have to put a lot of stuff into one question, is, so now this information with all these forms and beautiful things on a website and all of this stuff, is that going to be distributed to the developments that already went through the conversion prior to all of this being implemented? And if so, where can they get the information? Because I have to tell you, in the last 7 months, I've been hospitalized a couple of times, but I've walked in and out of the hallway and the lobby, and I saw nothing having to do with this new format that's moving forward at the developments. Again, it's great, but again, the updated information, as far as I know, has not been distributed to the residents who already went through the conversion and are still in the process of it. And as you well know, Mr. Williams, I am computer challenged, but still, none of that, I don't have any of that information on hand. And also the resident association, I don't know if they even know that they can still be an association and what that process is. With that, I leave the rest to a later date.
So I would say to you, Mr. Gonzalez, thank you for that recommendation. I think we will talk internally about sharing that information with the previous rounds.
Yes.
And then also, as I stated earlier, we just newly instated the post-conversion team. So they're going to be reaching out to all of the past resident association presidents. So they will know, if they don't know already, that they can maintain their resident associations. They still will receive TPA funds. We still technical assistance on elections. So all the things that, resident engagement kind of have done. So we'll work with our PACT partners to give them that particular type of technical assistance. So we'll follow up on those things and keep you abreast.
Okay, and you will give me a call regarding some of the other issues offline?
Yes, of course.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Chair, do you wish to provide any closing remarks, or may we adjourn?
We can adjourn. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Being that all matters before the board today have been addressed, may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion.
Motion.
Gonzalez, seconded by?
Second, Adams.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. None opposed. The recorded end time, 12:38 p.m. Thank you all. The next NYCHA board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 29th at 10 a.m. Stay safe. Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye. Great
Bye-bye.
presentation.
Thanks, everyone.